I'm Clara Butz from the Environment and Human Rights organization Urgewald, and I'm here with John Beard from the Port Arthur Community Action Network from the US, Jerry Aronses from the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development from CEED from the Philippines, and Bishop Jerry Alminaza, the lead convener of the No to Gas campaign and Laudato Si program chair of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. Just a few weeks ago, Urgewald published the 2023 Global Oil and Gas Exit List. It's a comprehensive database, a public database on the oil and gas industry, and it covers more than 1,600 companies in the upstream sector, in the midstream expansion, and gas-fired power expansion. The data is clear. While we urgently need to phase out fossil fuels, the oil and gas industry is expanding the problem. Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, plays an outsized role in this regard. 246 companies are building out their LNG capacities around the globe and doing so at a record pace. 2 LNG hotspots are standing out. We have the Gulf Coast in the US, which is set to become the world's largest LNG export hub, and one of the emerging hotspots for LNG import is built out in Southeast Asia. Oil and gas companies plan to increase global LNG export capacity to 729 million tons annually. This equals an increase of 162% of liquefaction capacity. 41% of that is built out along the Gulf Coast in the US. We can also see that when we look at the top LNG export companies, where we have 4 companies on there. We have Venture Global, Sempra Energy, Tellurian, and Cheniere, who are building out their capacities along the US Gulf Coast. Most of the gas, actually 88%, comes from the Permian Basin, the heart of the US fracking industry. Communities along the US Gulf Coast are fighting each and every one of these 21 proposed LNG export terminals. They just had a major victory and reversed an air permit of a new LNG facility. And John Beard, founder and leader of the Port Arthur Community Action Network, will tell us more about these fights and how these terrible projects are actually affecting their communities.
Yes, thank you, Clara. Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Beard, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Port Arthur Community Action Network in Port Arthur, Texas, in what I like to call the belly of the beast. Why do I say that? Because the largest refinery in the country is in Port Arthur. And just 15 miles down the road from Port Arthur is the second largest refinery in the country, where I formerly worked for 38 years, ExxonMobil. But Port Arthur is also becoming home to a known, very famously or infamously, I might say, for the exportation of fracked liquefied natural gas. We are currently home on the Louisiana side of the border, right across from Port Arthur, since we're the closest city. We are the Cheniere LNG, or Cheniere's Sabine Pass LNG, which is one of the largest exporters in the country of fracked gas to Europe. And then you have ExxonMobil's Golden Pass LNG, which is being converted from an import to an export facility. And the one that Clara just mentioned to you, Sempra LNG, which we won a major victory in the US Fifth Circuit Court, which vacated their air quality permit because, in the words of the court, the way the state regulatory agency permitted them to do the work that they want to do was arbitrarily and capriciously done. In other words, they had wanton disregard for the lives and health of the people in the community that they were affecting, that they were not using the best available equipment to reduce pollution. Now, granted, we'd all want to not even see this there at all, but you have to take your fights and your wins where you can fight them. Texas never met a permit it didn't like. So we're going to work on that angle of trying to stop and slow that train down while we fight on other fronts. But being here today is important in speaking to this issue because much of that gas is headed to Europe, to Germany and to other places in the European continent. And what's critical about it is that now this poisonous frack gas is being exported to other countries and bringing with them problems and disasters such as we've had, such as 5 major hurricanes in a 17-year period, such as some of the worst air quality in the entire United States, in the 95th percentile. And that's coming from contaminants such as Total refinery, which is the 3rd largest emitter of benzene, a known carcinogen, into the air that we have to breathe. Or oxybocalcinining, which is the largest emitter in Texas of sulfur compounds, over 11,000 tons per year of sulfur compounds and particulate matter that is so fine that if you would breathe it, it would go directly into your bloodstream. That's the kind of air we have to breathe. And there are other pollution sources. But it's important that we establish relationships with our European allies as well as our friends and brothers in Asia, because this is an existential threat to the lives and health of people everywhere, not just Port Arthur, not just my friends in Lake Charles or Freeport where Melanie lives, or in Corpus Christi where Alita lives, or down in Brownsville where Becca lives. My other allies that I work with, some of whom could not be here. We are all threatened by this, by sea level rise, by climate change, and by the change in the Earth's air quality. Well, we all need air to breathe. Air is life. And without good, proper, clean air, peoples can't live. But also, the poor are the ones that suffer the greatest burden from this, because they are the least able to defend themselves and to fight back against these multi-billion-dollar multinational companies who only care about money, not about the lives and health of people on numerous continents on various shores around this planet. So we're here to fight as a stand with them and to say that we are in alignment. We are together on fighting and combating this frack gas. And we say, as our indigenous brothers and sisters would like to say, or always say, keep it in the ground. It's there for a reason. Let's keep it in the ground, and let's accelerate, as you all are doing in Europe, transitioning to clean, green, renewable energy that won't pollute. We need to do that as quickly and as fast as we can, no exceptions. This is a threat that has to be met now, and we can meet it, but our voices must rise in demand to those nations that aren't in compliance and get them to follow the line, because it's their high need too. They're involved in it also. Thank you.
Well, everything that's exported somewhere needs to be imported somewhere again. The global LNG import capacity is being ramped up to 652 million tons annually. LNG import is booming, especially in Asia. We see 70% of the capacity built out there. And today we want to highlight Southeast Asia, a region that has enormous potential for renewable energies. Instead, companies like South Korea's KEPCO or KOGAS, the Bangladesh Power Development Board, the Philippines San Miguel Corporation, or the Vietnam Electricity Group are driving the gas-fired power build-out. A substantial part of that build-out will rely on imported LNG. But we have, two allies from the Philippines here that are going to tell us more about the build-out there and how it affects the communities there. Please, Jerry, can you start?
Thanks, Clara. Thanks for releasing and updating us on the global landscape on LNG build-out. As you've mentioned, Southeast Asia is one of the fast becoming biggest LNG import hub in the world. 70% of the expansion is in Asia. We're just next to China, who's really ramping it up. But what is happening in Southeast Asia? We just released 2 reports in this COP. One is on the landscape of what's happening in the energy transition in Southeast Asia. And one of the findings of that report is that renewable energy is in full swing in Southeast Asia. It actually is eclipsing in terms of permitted projects in Southeast Asia that more than double of the LNG and gas build-out. So what is happening is that the one that is being pushed by corporations, by international banks in the developed countries, from Japan, the US, and Europe, is mainly gas. And this is blocking and elbowing the needed renewable energy transition in the region. The second report that we've just launched today is actually a spotlight on what the implication of this buildup is. Southeast Asia houses one of the 8 key biodiversity hotspots globally, which is the Coral Triangle. At the heart of it is the Verde Island Passage, which is wherein the concentration of gas will have tremendous implication, not just to the marine resources of this region, but also to more than or close to 200 million lives of fisherfolk communities who are already bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. The gas build-out, as we've seen in the Philippines, in Verde Island Passage, have caused pollution, caused destruction, displacement. It undermines the existing or already fragile adaptive capacities of our coastal communities. For the Philippines, it is very essential that we protect our coastal communities and seas. We depend 60% of our protein intake just by marine resources. So for Filipinos and Southeast Asians, it is a matter of life and death. In this COP, there's a lot of conversation on fossil fuel phase out. And there is also a lot of conversation on what gas can actually bring to the region. There's a lot of myth again. One, that gas brings development and jobs. We have not seen that in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia. What gas brings is destruction, is displacement of already existing livelihoods by thousands, if not millions, of fisherfolks. Second, that gas is affordable, that gas will deliver affordable electricity in the region. That is a myth and that is a lie. In the Philippines, gas-based electricity have caused the tripling of our electricity bills. If not for renewable energy that has been scaled up, we would have experienced more inflation. Gas is clean. We've seen in the destruction, we've seen the pollution in the Verde Island Passage and many other countries, just like Thailand, in Rayong, how dirty gas has been and has caused tremendous pollution and spills in the areas. Lastly, that gas is a transition fuel. As the report that we have released, it is elbowing that transition. It is a blockage to that transition. My last words is that to respond to our colleagues in the US, in Southeast Asia, 10 years ago, we were faced with the biggest coal boom. We defeated that. And we will defeat this gas boom in Southeast Asia.
To add to this conversation, I come from a province and an island in Negros Occidental, Philippines, where when I was assigned there in 2013 as the third bishop of San Carlos, the first threat that I faced was the proposed coal-fired power plant. Thanks to the years of opposition to coal, mainly started by women power in Negros, in March 6, 2019, we succeeded to have our governor of the island declare Negros as coal-free and a renewable hub for renewable energy. But then, we're already happy that we will be coal-free. But then, a company again proposed the LNG power plant. And again, we opposed it. And last year, we're happy that the company withdrew its application. It is not really a transition energy for us. As Jerry here said, it is a detour. It is blocking because we already have a roadmap towards 100% renewable energy. We made a widespread consultation and discussion among stakeholders in the island in order to really make sure that our island would be renewable energy 100%. But then we're surprised that again they introduced this concept of LNG as a transition resource. And so we are again up and about, and Jerry is correct because there in Negros also we are bringing our hands together to oppose this and stop it, because this will further delay the meeting of 1.5 degrees centigrade climate goal that we are embracing also as a country and as an island. So, but we will do this together, especially with our young people behind us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for everything that you do regarding to oppose all that LNG boom and build out that's happening all around the globe. And we as civil society organizations, we cannot stress this enough. We need a fossil fuel phase out, and we need renewable energy for each and every community all around the globe. Gas is not a bridge fuel. It's not a bridge towards a sustainable future. It's a direct path to destroyed livelihoods and a global catastrophe. So thank you very much for being here, and we're now happy to take your questions. There's a question over there.
Emilio Godoy, Interpresa, journalist in Mexico. For John and Clara, who is financing this LNG expansion first in the US and the projects in Mexico? Mexico wants to become an export hub of gas from the US. What are the implications of this, as both countries, the US and Mexico, export emissions and help to slow down the transition in places like Philippines? And finally, would you say that the new methane regulations in Europe would work to control exports from the US? Thank you.
Yes, there are numerous investment companies and banks that are involved in the financing of LNG deals. But one of the things you have to realize is they distribute that out amongst several of them so that no one assumes too much risk. But banks like Citibank's one of the major ones, but you also have AXA, ING, in Europe you have OP, and there are several others. There are probably too many to name, but anyone that's pretty much involved in investing or investing in fossil fuels is invested in LNG. And there are also state agents at work on the Pacific Rim in Japan and in Korea that are heavily invested in that also, in those facilities, as well as in the construction of the very ships that carry this cargo back and forth. So what we have to do is what an organization I belong to is Stop the Money Pipeline. We have to intervene in the fact of them doing that, because in discussions I've had with some of these financial institutions and banks is that what they're doing is basically making the burden already on overstressed and overburdened communities worse. I've spoken to you about the pollution in Port Arthur that's caused so much cancer and deaths and COPD and harming people and giving them poor air quality. Well, now you're going to bring even more of that to my community and then exporting it to other parts of the world. What makes it bad is because when you do it in our community, those people are hurt and they have no means of redress. So by hurting and harming those people in the legal systems of most countries, you have a right to seek redress. You have a right to be compensated for damages done. So one of the things I try to bring to them is that you have a great deal of liability and culpability in the proliferation of exporting this fracked gas that potentially can create a liability and hurt your bottom line. So then my pitch becomes that you need to disinvest you need to first stop investing in any more of these projects and disinvest from the ones that you're in and rechannel that money and those energies into renewable, clean, green energy, but also with a sense of restorative justice to the communities that have been harmed by the fossil fuel industry and by the export and import of this fracked gas.
We see that the 15 largest investors of companies listed on the global oil and gas exit list invested $20 billion into oil and gas companies. The largest one on that side is BlackRock. We see Vanguard, State Street, so all the big institutional investors from the US. Also, many, many more. Most of them are actually from the US, especially in the top 15 investment companies. And those are numbers from our Investing in Climate Chaos report that we published this year. And also when we look into Germany, we see that Deutsche Bank, for example, tripled their LNG financing in the past few years. And that's not the only bank that's tripling or really increasing their finance in LNG. So the boom is really not only on the industry side, but also on the finance side. And of course, we're trying to stop that. And especially with our partner organization, CEED, we're trying with the Protective EIP campaign, so that's also where this picture is from. We really try to make LNG one of the first policy elements for new oil and gas exclusions. Any more questions? Yeah, there's one over there. And I think that hand was the first, and then we have another one.
Yes, Daphne Weisham with IGSD. I'm wondering if Urgewald is pushing for a binding global methane agreement as one way of restricting the flow of LNG to your country as well as all over the world. We have the global methane pledges, which are non-binding. And there is, of course, the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which could be one vehicle for a binding methane agreement. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, yes, from our end, we should, one, how does the methane pledge should be operationalized? Consequently, that should be a binding treaty. We hope that because many of the Southeast Asian countries have actually signed onto the pledge, we should urge them to actually operationalize that, and a treaty is called to order. But I think what is now quite pressing is actually in relation to the negotiation is actually the language, one of the strong language on fossil fuel phase out. And that's why we are one with the many civil society and governments here that are pressing to include that language that is aligned to 1.5 degrees. As I have mentioned, in the Philippines, 1.5 degrees means us losing 70 to 80% of our coral reefs. 2 degrees is 99% loss. We cannot imagine a 2-degree world for millions of Filipinos, much more hundreds of millions of Southeast Asian residents dependent on coastal resources. So the text is very important, and of course, in parallel to that, the importance of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which many governments have already ascended to and signed onto. So that's another initiative. Perhaps a methane pledge or methane treaty could actually, have a momentum as well in the near future.
Jörg Staude from German portal Klima Reporter. I have a question. The government says the LNG terminals will be used in future for green hydrogen or ammoniac or so on. What do you say about this? What's your opinion of this development? Is this possible, not possible? Is this a part, not a part?
In the U.S., there has been some talk of using them for hydrogen transport, but also what's come to the forefront also is converting them to be able to use ammonia, believe it or not. Ammonia has all the basic components in it that you would have without some of the inherent dangers and hazards of transporting liquefied natural gas. And they can derive the hydrogen from it as well as the natural gas components from that ammonia. So that has been talked about in some of those circles with those CEOs, and it would not surprise me if they would even try to do that as another transition should they not be able to export natural gas for whatever reason.
I think there are many proposals out there, and this belongs to the many pitfalls in achieving fossil fuel phase out from the very onset. Science is clear that if we delay that, we're doomed. From the perspective of a very vulnerable country, we cannot imagine that. Notwithstanding the data that hydrogen, the production of hydrogen is mainly coming from fossil fuel. So it extends that life of fossil fuel. Co-firing of ammonia, we know for a fact that with Japan and many other countries that have built industries on ammonia is actually pushing that for Southeast Asia. And we are up in arms to actually reject it because it will prolong the lives of the existing coal plants that we should actually be retiring and phasing out. Secondly, we know for a fact what ammonia brings to communities that live around these coal plants, notwithstanding the pollution already by these coal plants. So in a nutshell, it's one of those proposals that mainly extends the life of fossil fuel, but also exacerbates existing problems of fossil fuel industry.
Thank you very much, and we're happy to take more questions outside.